guys, it is I, fanciest man alive. Today I wanted to do a different kind of video. I wanted to talk about one of my favorite things, more of my favorite race in Skylanders Giants. That of course is the Arkeyans. I think the Arkeyans are one of the biggest Skylanders mysteries of all time. Because the influence of the Arkeyans are not just in Skylanders Giants. It's in Spyro's Adventure, it's in Swap Force. There's like little bits of it in Trap Team. The Arkeyans are everywhere in Skylands, but Giants is the only game that kind of centers around them. And one of the biggest questions I've ever had about the Arkeyans is, are they biological or are they mechanical? So like, are they like machines themselves, or are they like flesh beings that made the robots, like the Conkertrons and all that? I just want to know who they are. From the knowledge that I know right now, I can say that they were like the most advanced race in Skylands. They built these giant machines just to like enforce their power across the lands. In the opening for Skylanders Giants, you can see that there's like hundreds of these Conkertrons. And like they're all just they're like massive. Like the Giants, like in their canon size next to the regular Skylanders, are already massive themselves. But think of that same size when they're dwarfed by the Conkertrons. They're so small compared to them, only reaching like the top of their legs or something like that. Another thing to talk about is, why did they make the Iron Fist of Arcus? Like, why did they make that for their machines? And one thing that I think is actually really important is, did the Conkertrons themselves use the Iron Fist, or were they controlled to use the Iron Fist? Because my thoughts is that they kind of gained a sentience and started using it for themselves. Because in the opening, you can see like the leader Conkertron like raising up his fist, basically kind of like a king towards these smaller Conkertrons that are everywhere. And it's just such a unique thing to think about. So I wanted to explore that a little bit more today. One thing that I do think about the Conkertrons is, I think they're controlled by their own machine ghosts. Because in the Skylanders Giants campaign, you help Machine Ghost get his own Conkertron body, which is the blue one, and he's your ally throughout the whole game. But one thing that always caught my attention is, if he could pilot that machine and basically like use it as his body, did all the other machines or all the other Conkertrons use Machine Ghosts? Like, did they have their own, or were they working as like a hive mind where they only followed the actions of the leader? It's one of like the biggest things that I like, because just thinking that they had to get these artificial like spirits just to pilot these massive machines. Because in the heads there are like individual controls for a physical being, but if my theory is correct, and they only need the Machine Ghosts, then they don't need those controls unless they're like privately controlled. More on the history on the Arkeyans is, you can see influences of them in the first ever Skylanders game. You even get to pilot one when you go to the Fiery Forge, I'm pretty sure is the name of the level. But in the Forge, you get to see the Conkertrons get produced, like how they're made. It's in a active, like they're in lava. They can withstand these elements to the point where they can make these things anywhere, and I think that provides so much more knowledge on how much of a war machine these things really were, because they could produce them on the fly anywhere in these conditions. Because in Giants, like, water's not a problem. You even like the level where you pilot Machine Ghost, it's not a problem for them. And then in Fiery Forge, like, you're literally walking in lava, so obviously that's not like an issue. But back to Spyro's Adventure, the Conkertrons weren't the only things made there. There were other Arkeyan machines, like the Arkeyan Lance Master, the ones with the rocket hands, I can't remember, and then like the little turrets. There's so much that's made for the Arkeyans when we don't even know what the Arkeyans themselves look like. We barely have any information on the Arkeyans, but their like influence and their machines still carry so much weight within Skylands. For example, one of the Skylanders themselves is an Arkeyan. Drill Sergeant, in fact, is. The story for Drill Sergeant goes that he was buried deep underground because the Arkeyans is such an are such an old race. So when they built their machines, they had to face the act of time. So since Drill Sergeant was buried underground and everything, he hadn't seen the light of day in so long, until another Skylander, Terrafin, which was digging underground, found him and like uplifted him. And what I think is really cool in the lore for Drill Sergeant is that he saw Terrafin as like his master now. Like he saved him from like deteriorating completely, like rusting over and stuff like that. And Terrafin tried teaching him that, you're your own being. You should follow your own set of rules. And it's so cool to me, like, to think that Drill Sergeant was just one of many Arkeyan machines. I personally believe that machines like Drill Sergeant were mass-produced because for him to be buried underground, he obviously had to be like stationed somewhere or something like that. So the thought of there being like hundreds of Drill Sergeants going into battle is kind of a terrifying thought. The Arkeyans had such an expansive set of warriors to the point where they were kind of an overwhelming force. It's like they had such a uniqueness to them to where it was enough to differentiate from every other race in Skylanders. Like, goblins, greebles, chompies, they can't like deal with all that. Like, I think it's pretty obvious what the Arkeyans wanted to do with Skylands, which was rule over Skylands themselves. They wanted to, rule it with an iron fist, like the Iron Fist of Arceus. It's such a cool concept, and I just love the Arkeyans for it. I think they're one of the most technologically advanced races in the whole lore of Skylanders. And again, like I said earlier, we have zero information on what they look like. We have the machines of what they built, like the Conquertrons, Drill Sergeant, the Lance Masters, and all that. Like, we know what they're capable of building, we just don't know what they are. It's up for interpretation as to what you want to believe they are. Personally, I think it's really cool if they would be like biological beings that like eventually just died out and their machines just like kept on going, which is another thing I want to talk about. I think after the Arkeyans kind of like their whole race went extinct, I like to think that the machine AI, or kind of like the machine ghosts themselves, took over the expansion of the Arkeyan weapon factories and kept mass producing these weapons until like they eventually couldn't anymore. Because the idea of machine ghosts also like adds the fact of like sentience to them. So obviously they would notice if the Arkeyans themselves would disappear. So they'd be like, hey, we better start, like making stuff. It's just so sick to think about. I just love the Arkeyans. It's one of my favorite races in Skylands, and I think there's so much more that we can learn about them. We only got like snippets of it in like Swap Force and Spyro's Adventure, but in Skylanders Giants it was so expansive. Not to mention they had like the Arkeyans had man-operated machines like the Arkeyan Copter. Like, you had to be either, like, a Mabu or, like, in-universe, Mabu-sized person to fit in the cockpit. Or, like, a biological Arkeyan yourself to fit in there. Why else would you build a cockpit if you didn't have, like, if you yourself didn't have, like, that, like, small of a body? Obviously, the Conquertrons can't fit in there. Drill Sergeant wouldn't be able to operate that thing. So, it just adds layer upon layer upon layer of the lore that these guys may have. And it's so cool to me. A thing that I would like to know about the Arkeyans themselves is, how did they die out? Like, was it just they were running out of, running out of population? Was there no food? Like, were their resources limited? What made them disappear? And are they still alive somewhere? Like, another thing is they didn't die at all. Maybe they took like most of their army and went off to another planet or something, because we never know. There could be like Archean spaceships, like Archean fleets of these things. We can only be seeing like a brunt of what the Arkeyans could make. The Arkeyans could have millions, even billions of these things, maybe. But again, we don't have enough information to even say, because they're such like a mysterious race. It's so cool. It's so cool. I heavily implore you guys to look deeper into it. Obviously, I can't explain like everything here, so I highly encourage you to go look at some of it yourself if you're also interested in the Arkeyans. Again, I think they're some of the coolest things in Skylanders ever, because they have the most influence in every game. Skylanders Giants was literally about it, and then throughout like every game, like there was influences. Like in one of the levels in Swap Force, there was an Archean graveyard, which meaning these things can die. Like these things like were eventually thrown away because maybe they weren't even needed, or maybe they weren't mass produced anymore, so they didn't need or they didn't have room for these things. And then Trap Team, like Flynn's kind of talks about how they were like some of the biggest enemies that we faced. It's such a cool concept, and if you do like the Arkeyans, I heavily implore you to go look at more of the lore. Obviously, I can't explain all of it in the video, but it's so cool. Thank you guys for listening to my rant about the Arkeyans, and I hope you learned something today. I'm glad to be back, guys. I am the fanciest man alive, but you could be too. Honestly, you know what? One day I'm gonna get merch for you guys. One day, like Peck fancy merch. It's gonna be like a suit with my face on it. It's gonna be a suit with my face on it. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Stay fancy.